I'm Eniola Aluko, former professional footballer, sports lawyer, and now investor and advisor at Mercury 13, the women's football investment group, the lovely people who will be on the panel next following this talk, led by Victoire Suki. I'm delighted to be here to talk about women, money and power. When I was told about the title, I was like, whoa, that gets me going. That is a powerful title. So I'm delighted to be here. A powerful combination to discuss. We'll talk women's football through the lens of numbers, which is obviously the language that Bloomberg speaks, the language of numbers. I'd like to invite you on a journey today through my life and career spanning 30 years in women's football and the exponential financial growth through to present day that has turned a significant power shift for women's sport and for women's athletes. So I'm going to invite you on a trip down memory lane. Slide. There we go. No prizes for guessing which one I am. That is me in 1995, the only girl in the boys' team. Looking very happy to be there, obviously. And, there was no girls playing football in 1995. It was very odd. I was the odd one out in many ways. It wasn't cool. It wasn't on TV. But I was welcomed by these boys. And it was the start of my journey playing football and really feeling like football was my way of assimilating. But the context was there was no finances, there was no infrastructure, there was no pathway for me as a young female footballer. But I played because I enjoyed it, and I was very much the girl in school that got the reputation of playing football. I was better than all the boys as well. So that was a long time ago, but that was very much the beginning. In 1997, that's me and my younger brother, who's 2 years younger than me. He went on to be a professional footballer as well. And the £5 signifies the amount of money I had to pay to play football in 1997. This is me at 9 years old. And I had to pay for my kit, I had to pay for my shin pads, I had to pay for water, I had to pay for everything in order to play. And there was no infrastructure, there was no financial support. It was very, very different to my brother, who at this point, at 7 years old, he had a pathway. He was able to say, I want to do that. I want to be a professional footballer. So even though my mom did a very good job of making us look equal in terms of kit, we weren't. We weren't in terms of the finances and infrastructure that was around for young girls and for women's sport. So there was no female role models really in football at the time, and the closest was the Williams sisters. The salary at the time, so both Serena and Venus obviously, were sort of up and coming at the time, and the salary for these two was $37,949 when they won the Grand Slams in 1997. But this is important because women's tennis was visible. So it signified to me that it was possible to be in sport as a black girl, and it was important to see female athletes on TV. So there was a difference there, and that made me then go and start playing tennis. It inspired me. And that was the difference, I think, in terms of women's tennis and women's football, was that it was visible. Now Serena Williams is worth $300 million. And this was the start. And these Williams sisters, they're a brand, they're investors now. But it was really important to see female role models for me on TV. Now into my teens, there was still no professional league, still no professional women's league. Football was very much a hobby. But I was earning £100 a week, and the train fare was covered. I was travelling from university down to southeast London twice a week to play football. And this was when I started to feel like, okay, I'm good at this, semi-professional. We won 2 cup trophies, but it still wasn't a career that I could follow. And I was at uni at the time, I was studying law. And at this point, I was thinking, well, this is just a hobby. I'm not going to be able to do this full time. But we had some success with Charlton, and £100 a week allowed me to buy a few pairs of trainers and things like that. And at the same time, I was playing for England, and we went to China. This was a big milestone for the England women's team in 2008. We went to China, we got to the quarterfinals, and this was probably my first legal test in terms of trying to really push for better contracts for my teammates and for myself. We didn't really have a strong collective voice as women at the time because we were semi-professional. But what was happening was that a lot of players had to take unpaid leave from their work. So they were losing money representing their country, which we didn't feel really made sense. So what I did was I really tried to push as much as I can with the Professional Footballers Association and said, we need a little bit more security in what we're doing so we're not losing money. And so the Football Association then granted central contracts, which allowed for all of England players to be paid £16,000 a year, which was significant at the time. Still not, to the professional level and still not a huge amount of money, but it helped a lot of players who were, really torn between, gosh, I've got to take time off, I've got to take unpaid leave and play for my country at the same time. So we had success in sort of pushing that on and getting a little bit more security in terms of our contracts as England players. And at the time, I got scouted to go to America, and at the time I was earning £40,000 when I went to America, which I thought I was millionaire at the time. It was really, it felt like a big jump because this was my search to become a professional footballer. There was no professional league in England. I had to go to America to play professional football. And, I got a Nike deal, which was great at the time. My first sort of commercial income that was coming in for me as a footballer. Puma were a founding partner who paid 10 million at the time over 5 years. But the league collapsed in 2011 because it was unsustainable. There was not the right infrastructure, broadcasting was minimal, brands were minimal, owners were not in it for the long term. So unfortunately that league collapsed, which for me was pretty devastating because I went there to pursue my dream of becoming a professional footballer. And I came back quite disillusioned. I actually thought the Olympics in 2012 was going to be my last swan song. I was 25 at the time. I said, right, I'm going to become a lawyer. I'm going to become a sports lawyer. I'm done with this football. I'm done with this lack of infrastructure, lack of support, lack of finance in the game. But was I wrong? Because the Olympics, for anyone that went to the Olympics in 2012, was an absolute game changer for women's football. We opened the Olympics, and it opened the eyes of so many. So many people fell in love with women's football. And 80,000 people turned up at Wembley at the time, and I remember walking out like it was an out-of-body experience, seeing so many people turn up for women's football in 2012. And it really changed, not my own perception of what could be possible, but everybody's in the game. It was really a shift. It was a powerful shift for the athletes, for the industry, that then led to other clubs, professional clubs, the big clubs, Chelsea, Arsenal, Manchester City, Manchester United, then deciding to take it more seriously. So then I had a choice between, do I carry on with my law degree, at which I had qualified at the time, or do I choose football? So this allowed me, at the time I got a training contract at a law firm, and I was offered £60,000 to become a lawyer. And so what I did was, I was a good lawyer at the time, and I took it to Chelsea and I said, well, if you want me to be a professional footballer, you better pay me £60,000. If you want me to give up my law degree, which I've worked very hard for, you're going to have to pay me £60,000. So it was sort of minimal level that allowed me to then really sort of feel a little bit more secure financially in terms of my football career. So the league, after the Olympics, the league really had a real vision in terms of creating a professional football league. But in terms of commercially, it was still minimal in terms of zero income coming into the league in 2011. And it wasn't until really 2019 that Barclays came in and invested 10 million into the league, which felt significant at the time. I think it was, now we look back and it was a smaller investment, but it felt significant at the time. Barclays were, a big commercial sponsor. They then renewed to 45 million in 2022, and we now have the Women's Super League with one of the best leagues in the world, with big clubs really investing in female athletes, and the power of broadcasting, allowing female athletes to have a voice, the power of brands now sponsoring players, the power of big brands coming into the game. And this is where it started on the league level. I had a lot of fun, as you can see, winning trophies with Chelsea. Sorry to any Arsenal fans in the room. But we did have fun winning, and that was a great platform for the league to continue to grow, and it's continued even to this day. I then retired and I went to Juventus. I didn't retire. I spent the last 2 years of my career in Italy before I retired. And this was a different type of boys' club. It was a lot more commercial. I got an Adidas deal when I went to Juventus. And the man next to me, you might know him, Cristiano Ronaldo. I was paid 75,000 euros at the time, which was significant. I was one of the highest paid players. He was paid 28 million. So there was a bit of a gap between the women's Juventus team and the men's Juventus team, which I think shows just how far the gap is. And the opportunity really, I think, for women's football to go in a different direction. We're probably not going to catch those numbers, but I think there's an opportunity to do something very different. And Juventus at the time were doing really, really special things in women's football in Italy. We sold out the Alliance Stadium, Juventus v Fiorentina. 40,000 people turned up. And it was like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. Two big clubs in Italy at the time. It was really, really significant for us to see, women's football growing in Italy beyond, around the world and beyond the UK. And then I retired and I went into executive management in LA in 2021-22. And this was when I really felt that I could do something that I hadn't really had the opportunity to do in terms of really giving female players the equity and the salaries that they deserved. So my budget as a sporting director that sort of sat at the centre of the wheel of a football club was 1.2 million, which allowed me to pay the best players 6 figures. So our highest paid player was 175,000, which was significant in the context of women's football. 14,000 season tickets were sold before a ball was kicked at Angel City. And that was testimony to the sort of commercial focus of the club. Big sponsors like Klarna came on board. DoorDash was the front of a shirt sponsor that sponsored 10 million and then had a really good community arm as well. And then we had brands like Johnny Walker investing as well. So it was the first time really we'd seen a real commercial focus for women's football and a real successful commercial vehicle that then I think encouraged and taught other clubs how to do it commercially. Because up until then, I think women's football had been seen as a bit of a, is it charity, is it social good? But I think Angel City really set out the parameters of how to commercially monetize women's football, and I was very proud to be part of that. And so I joined, when I left Angel City, I then joined Mercury 13, who are the wonderful people who are going to speak next. I joined as an investor and an advisor, and this was so significant for me as somebody who, as you could see, I'd been on a journey in women's football as a player, but I really wanted to be part of the future of commercializing the game, reimagining the game, providing equity and power to players through financial, freedom, financial investment. So it's such an amazing opportunity that I'm sure that the people next will talk more about to be part of Mercury 13 Investment Group. The first investment was Como Women, very sort of elevated luxury place. Como, I'm sure some of you have been there, and it's been amazing to see the transformation of the team, the rebranding, the deal with Nike, the investment that's going on. It's been really amazing to be part of. And I'd love to be able to announce a new partnership for Como Women, which is with We Are 8, founded by Zoe Kalar, who is here today in the audience. It's amazing to announce a female-founded front of jersey sponsor of Como Women. That is a social media channel to reshape social media as a new, safer space using AI models to eradicate abuse and hatred, which is important specifically for women. This partnership will be discussed on the next panel, so I don't want to give too much away, but we are super excited to announce this with We Are 8. So from paying £5 20 years ago to investing in a women's multi-club ownership group, I'm proud to have seen and experienced the financial and commercial journey of women's football, which is still growing, and it's such an exciting part of sport right now is women's football. If the last 20 years is anything to go by, there's very, very exciting growth ahead. I know the 6-year-old me in that first photo would never, ever have thought that I'd be on the stage at Bloomberg talking about my journey, but therein lies the power of women's football, the power to inspire the next generation, to dream and continue to dream about a new frontier for women's football, and women's sport, a new opportunity for growth, and to the moon, as we say at Mercury 13. So thank you for joining me on this journey by numbers. Thank you to Bloomberg for having me on stage, and yeah, have a great rest of your afternoon.